so here we are at the step with the wiring harness. We're at 2.8.1 in the manual. And per the manual, what we're going to be doing is needing to run all the wiring down and around up to the control panel. We left a lot of these zip ties loose, and the main reason for that is now we got to deal with this wiring harness. So let me give you a look at what it's supposed to look like and why some of these things and some of these provisions are in there. But like I was mentioning, we got a heater, we got a temperature sensor, we've got 2 fans actually that we need to deal with onto the front of this. Stepper motor for your extruder. We've got a couple sensor wires right up in here, and a few other things that we need to address. Over here on the finished up printer, we've got this wiring harness that's right here on the top, and it comes down to the extrusion head right over here. Let me turn this around. We've got 2 cooling fans, the wiring for it, the stepper motor, the heater, and the temperature sensor. Now this head needs to move around, which means it's got to go all the way forward, it's got to go all the way to the side. And you can see what this loom is doing. This is an anti-chafe loom, and it's attached at a couple points that we'll go through, and it comes down along the bottom of this, up and around to the front of the control panel. But creating this loop and this Z-bend in it allows this to move and flex as this print head comes around at high speeds. And as it comes and moves over, it basically starts S-curving into itself. So we've got to create this situation. We've got to wrap these wires up with this loom, and we've got to get them up and away from points of mechanical contact with this anti-chafe. Then as it comes around to the back of the machine, we've got a slot right here in the back. Comes through this, it's going to come down along the back side and drop through this hole into the bottom. We had mentioned that it's going to come up forward underneath this lower acrylic plate, and it's going to go right to our control panel. Seems like a lot of wires, but when we get to that point, we're going to go through them step by step. It's going to be fairly simple. So let me clear this down and we'll go through this. Okay, for this step, we're going to need the anti-chafe loom from set G, and we're going to need some of our zip ties. And as from the tools are concerned, we're going to need some side cutters or dikes or some way to cut these zip ties on out. So taking a look at the front of this, we've got 3 sets of wires that actually need to be addressed. All right, first ones are these thick red heater wires. They're going to come up and over to this. So first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and untangle these. When we untangle or untie these, make sure you don't damage that little label. These ones are pretty easy to identify, so it's not a problem if you do, but just always be careful. Okay, we got those, and we're just going to kind of lay that on out. I'm going to slide this forward so we can kind of see this coming into action. Next, we've got our fan wires coming from our rear cooling fan. I'm going to go ahead and take that little wire tie off of it. We can save that later and use this on some of the wiring to help lay it in. So we've got that. I'm going to just lay those on back. We've got our stepper motor for our extruder. This controls the motor that controls the precision amount of how much filament is coming out. It uses an algorithm or math to know the diameter of the filament and how much the diameter of the wheel, and if it moves X amount and the diameter of the hole that it's squirting it out, it can calculate exactly how much plastic it is pushing through. And that's critical as it moves versus its speed versus its layer height. So it can calculate out to get this, this perfect laydown. So that is our stepper motor. I'm going to go ahead and lay that on out there. Okay, coming up to the front. This right here is our temperature sensor for the extruder itself. Let me get this untangled. There we go. And just lay these wires on out, and we can see how that is forming up nice and easy like. Look like a lot, but it's not. But there's actually one more that we need to deal with. We have a front cooling fan up here as well that needs to be incorporated into this loom. So let's go ahead and grab that. And here is our front cooling fan. Now the front cooling fan aids with certain types of plastics and layers with it cooling onto the deck, which means you need active cooling, especially with overhangs and stuff like this. PLA versus ABS, you may want no cooling on the first couple layers to get it in here properly to the bed. Then after, like, say, the 5th layer, go ahead and turn the fan on and start doing some active cooling as well. All depends on what you're printing, how you're printing, type of filament that you're using, but you need to have active cooling as an option. This one has dual fans, and what's really cool about this one is it's removable for servicing to get to this head for changing out filament if you get clogs, anything like that. And it just does that via a quick magnet. It just snaps right here onto the front and allows you to quickly remove it. but we need to get the wiring tied into the same system. So we're going to go ahead and just remove this wire tie. Get that out and bring that one up and across as well. Now, in the instructions, it says that you need to cut the zip tie and insert this into there as well. You can actually get this up and underneath this zip tie. There's no need to cut it and waste plastic. Because in my household, I'll tell you what, anytime I need a zip tie, I can't find them, so I try to save them as much as possible. Real easy, what you can do is just go ahead and slide off this paper tab. I'm going to slip it up underneath the zip tie. Bring them up. As soon as I bring it up, I'm going to put the paper back on. Right there, easy. And pull these wires on through. Now we want a little slack in this wiring. We don't want it super tight because we do want to be able to move this this fan off if necessary. You can even snap it up higher on something else if you don't want this active cooling down here as well. So we'll just go ahead and put that there. We got a little bit of a slack in there, a little bit of a loop, which gives us that free play. And we're going to bring this right onto the back. Now, a couple things. We've got this belt system right here, and these wirings are coming up through the top. So we want these to come right up and over. These ones need to come up and meet this. And if we take a look in the manual, we've got a picture of this. Right here, it's picture 2.8 C. As well as D. It indicates and shows exactly what it is that we're trying to achieve, but here's a good video reference of it. And that's basically these wires up and away from this belt system and these up and over the top of the belt system. So these are going to come and meet up right over here and continue on to the back. So what I'm going to do to get these in place that I want, I'm going to get them nice and pretty like right in here, and I'm going to take a zip tie and lock it in right into this position. Okay, and get these snugged up, bring this over. There we go. Nice and pretty like right there. Go ahead and give that a clip. I'm going to throw one more zip tie on just a little further back. Just right in here to keep it nice and bunched up tight. There we go. All right, so we're going to be installing this loom, and what we want is this loom to come right up to the front, right up here, to protect this from this metal lip edge. It's going to come along, and we're going to pick up these wires up into the loom, and it's going to continue on into the back. Now, the problem is that the way these split looms are normally done is you open them up and you kind of wrap around the wire, and it's real easy and fast. But because these wires aren't connected just yet, it's very difficult to kind of try and continue looping and wrapping it around. Real easy way to do that is kind of thread it on. So if you just open up the loom and wrap it around initially, the first one, what you can do is basically twist and thread, making sure that grabs all the wires as it rotates, and thread it down and on just like this. There we go, nice and pretty, just like that. At this point, we're going to pick up this wiring harness, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap around there. So it's picked up, and now we can take this wire and this wiring harness, and we can take this loom, and we can just start doing our wrap. All right, so now that we've wrapped the wiring loom close to these wires where we're starting to get close to the little paper tags, what you're going to do is just go ahead and clip off. These are going to go up to the control panel, so we don't need all this wrapped all the way up into here. So go ahead and just use your side cutters, clip that off, and you can see approximately how much I left there, about 8 inches or so on the wiring loom. All right, so the wiring has got to be laid in a way that we have enough slack, so later when we put the top on and the front on, we're going to be able to zip this on up. On the other one, I showed you where we needed that Z-bend that allows this head to move around without interfering with it mechanically. So what we're going to do is put it at its furthest extent from its exit point. So I'm going to push it all the way forward and all the way over. What I'm going to do is go ahead and lay it into the slot into the back and create a Z-bend right in here. Now, a little extra slack is nice because it allows you to tweak it into the up position, so anytime it gets folded over here, it goes up instead of down. So right there, it looks really good, and that's going to allow this to come over and flex up this way, twist on over itself that way, and just like that, it's all set. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that point and have that right there. Remember on this back wire, I said we can go ahead and use these twist wires that we had earlier to kind of just hold things into place, and that's exactly why I did that. We're going to drop zip ties through this, and because I might want to adjust this a little bit further later on, I'm still going to go ahead and use this. I'm just using the white one from that other one because it's a bit longer. There we go, we've got that all set. Coming on down, and we have the zip tie right here onto the bottom. If you left enough slack in it, you're going to be able to just feed it right on through this and right on through to the front. But make sure you don't damage any of the paper when you do that. Right there. And then we had this one right here, and now we can go ahead and apply a zip tie at this point loosely. And see, we didn't have to shove all those paper tags through that. Few clicks on that, and there we go. I'm going to take the whole harness and put it up through this hole right here. I'm going to make sure that this goes on the outside of this rod. Comes up through that hole and basically exits right up into the front. Now remember, I noted that we have this acrylic panel. It can come down and around. And if you want to get really fancy with this, you can actually route it onto the outside of this for a nice, even, cleaner install. Stops it from looping on out. So we'll just go ahead and lay that on in there. So now at this point, we've got all these wires coming up and forward to the control panel, and we can see that they're basically generally laid into place where they need to be. They all, for the most part, are still loose, which is going to allow us to do some really nice, tidy cleanup when we're all set with this printer. There's a few more wires that we need to deal with and get loomed in while we're at this point. Those wires are these ones right here on our side, and we got another wire right over here on its side. Now the same thing. Let me go ahead and lift up the other printer, and I'm going to show you what these wires do. So these wires on this side handle this stepper motor, which is our X-axis right here. Stepper motor, and then we've got additional wires which are our sensors on both of these. We've got a sensor over here which is for our X-axis, and then we got our Y-axis. But it comes down right along to the bottom, comes right in here, and what we want to do is create a loop to this zip tie point, because when this is into the full back position, we can see we take out the slack here, and when it's in the full forward position right here, no problem, no mechanical bind right onto that. Same with the other side. We've got a single sensor right over here, and it's just doing the exact same thing. Comes down, loops in, zip ties here, and comes down and across. So that's what we're going to do at this point. So on that, what I want you guys to note on this is we need strain relief, because even though that this is going to be zip tied up to these points, if the wires are flexing at their solder joints, it's going to damage, and the solder joints become brittle. So what we need to do is basically zip tie this to this frame to stop the flexing happening at the solder joints and in the flexible wire itself. We do that right here on this little cross brace on the bottom. I'm going to rotate this up so you can see it. And what we're going to do is just put a zip tie through this up and around and zip tie the wires to the bottom of this. And that creates our flex point. Right there, and so that is now our flex point. So just go ahead and use your side cutters and clip off this zip tie. Let's get these unbundled out. Right here, we're going to be attaching this wire set up here at this point and down this, so we need to have its maximum extent. So we're going to slide these onto the rear, bring these on up. So we're going to zip tie it approximately right there and then bring it on down. And here's another zip tie point to bring this harness up into the loom and down safely. And because I'm a neat freak, I'm going to add one more zip tie in here. Keep these nice and tidy. Let's see how that works. There we go, no problem. Now these wires can come on down, and to this loop which we left loose, they can actually thread through this lower one and forward. There we go. Missed that wire. There. All right, we're set with that. We've got all these wires bundled up right over here. Let's just come to this side. And we are essentially going to do the exact same thing we just did. With this wire, bringing it forward, pushing this to the rear extent so that we have max slack out of it and coming straight on down and on over to this point. Click that. All right, so we've got the right side all done and looped up. So I've got it zip tied right up to the cross brace right in here. And as it rotates forward, we can see that the wire is nice and free, comes on down to the side and out to the front. We got all these wires over here. Now the last set of wires that we haven't discussed is actually for our printed heat bed, our heated print bed. So it is a heater, so we've got to apply power to it. It also has a temperature sensor on it as well, so it has to know its exact temperature depending on the type of plastics and stuff like that. So if we actually look up onto the bottom side here, we can see a bunch of wires tucked up into the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and just pull these on down and have a look at these. So just like the extrusion head up at the top, we've got the exact same kind of sensor wires for the temperature, and two wires get these unthreaded from each other. There we go. And 2 wires for the power for the heater itself. So that's our heater, and that is our temperature sensor. They've got tags on them that denote which ones they are. Now, I like nice and tidy on these wires, so what we're going to do is take these sets of wires. I'm going to point this right at the camera, and we have all these laser cut holes into the back panel. Right here onto the bottom right, we have this bottom right triangle. We're going to put it through from the front side, out the back side, and down along to the front. So I'm just going to take this wire set, put it through the hole, pick it up on the back side and draw it through. There we go. And just bring them up forward to where our control panel will be. We'll worry about tightening and getting these tensioned properly here in a second. So there we go. That concludes our wires as far as loosely being put where they are. I'm kind of leaving these more loose than I would normally on a build because I want to have enough slack when I attach these to the panel that I'm going to be able to slide the panel forward and show you where everything plugs in properly. On yours, you can definitely just kind of leave them where they're at. I might even cut these zip ties to bring this wiring further out, because I know where everything goes in and can easily get tucked back on in. So now that we have the wiring all brought forward for the control panel, we can focus right back onto our mechanical and finishing up our mechanical, which is going to be installing our front panel, which has our idler pulleys for our belt, installing and tensioning our belts for our Y-axis, the top, the upper bridge for our print spool, and then we're going to move on to the control panel.